evening, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for tuning in. Tonight, we're going to compare and battle the two versions of the same album, Under the Blade from Twisted Sister. We have the original Secret Records version right here versus the 1985 re-release, remastered version from Atlantic Records right here. Technically, this one is the Spitfire release, but it was re-released in '85. I believe it was on Atlantic Records because that was what Twisted Sister was on in the '80s. So, my introduction to Twisted Sister was in 2004. First album I ever owned was Stay Hungry. Then I picked up a compilation, and then it was this and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll I got together. And so my initial introduction to this album was this version. So I grew up listening to this one, loved this one. I had always heard about the original version, but I never actually had a chance to listen to it until a few years later whenever it was kind of put out there on YouTube. Plus, I never had a record player until just a few years ago. And when I got a record player, I tracked one of these down and got the original version of it. So I had heard this before, online on YouTube whenever it had been put up there. I forget exactly at what point that happened, but whenever it was on YouTube, I was able to check it out and listen to the original versions of all these songs. I think both of these versions are very good. I think they each have their pros and cons. The original version of it, it's a little more raw. I think the guitars are a little crunchier sounding. But it's definitely not. It definitely doesn't sound as professionally done as the re-release. But this re-release, it may sound a little clearer, I guess. But the edge is kind of taken off. Where these guitars sound really crunchy and heavy. These ones, the guitars sound a little thicker, but that crunch is sort of smoothed out a little bit. So I think it works to the detriment of some songs, but I think it actually works to the advantage of others. Both of these versions I've really grown to like over the years. So we're going to talk a little bit track versus track of which versions I prefer. So to kick things off with What You Don't Know Sure Can Hurt You. And this is a song that I actually prefer live as opposed to either of these two studio versions. I've always felt the song had more energy live. As opposed to the two studio versions that we have here. But the intro to the song, I definitely like better on the original. I think that raw, crunchy sound works better for that heavy, palm muted guitar note at the beginning of the song that isn't it's like the first minute of the song as the song's kind of building up. But when the song does crash in, I think the remastered version is a little bit better. I think the mix between all the instruments feels a little better to me. So I'm gonna give the remastered version the point for What You Don't Know Sure Can Hurt You. But both versions are definitely really good. Second up, we have my favorite Twisted Sister song. That is Bad Boys of Rock and Roll. And Bad Boys is, especially if you don't count I'll Never Grow Up Now, which we're not going to since it's not on the original version. It's probably the least heavy song on the album. It's a little more melodic, a little airier, I guess. And I think the more produced version of the 1985 version kind of works a little bit better. Again, I think the mix between all the instruments is a little more even as opposed to on the original version, but both versions are really good, and it may just be because my introduction to the song and what made me fall in love with the song was all the way back in 2004 when I had this copy, so that could be it. But I do prefer the remastered version of Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, so the 85 version gets another point. Next up we have Run for Your Life. The original, the rawness of the original song, I think, gives it that extra sense of danger that I think is kind of imperative to the song, and it it loses that on the '85 remastered version, and I think it may be why "Run for Your Life" has never really been one of my favorite songs. I don't dislike it, but when I heard the original version of it, I definitely grew to like it better than I ever had before. So "Run for Your Life," I definitely got to go with the original version of that one. Next up, we have "Sin After Sin." I really like both versions of this actually. The the raw version sounds really gritty, really heavy. I think D sounds menacing in both versions, especially that build into the chorus. You're committing sin after sin. I love that part. But the remaster version has that thicker guitar sound. I think it adds a little bit of heaviness to it, actually. Um, and it works just as well. I had a hard time deciding which of these two versions I liked. But after listening to both of these tracks back and forth, I think I slightly prefer the original, but it's close. That's so far the closest one yet. So I'm going to give the point to the original for Sin After Sin. Next up, we have Shoot 'Em Down. Much like I said with Sin After Sin, I think the '85 version, it feels a little thicker. It fills out the guitar sound a little bit. And even though the crunchy guitars is nice in some songs, I don't find it necessary in Shoot 'Em Down. I think having that fuller sound works better for Shoot 'Em Down, which is a great song. Not the heaviest on the album, but it's a killer track nonetheless. But I just enjoy having that fuller sound that the '85 version gives you as opposed to the first one. Again, I like both versions, but I'm going to have to go with the remastered for Shoot 'Em Down. Alright, next up we have Destroyer. Now, Destroyer is a song that has never really been my favorite either. With this version of it, I thought it was alright, but I would hear Twisted Sister fans online talk about how much they love the song, and I'm like, it's good. It's not the best on the album, but it's good. I can listen to it. And much like Run for Your Life, once I heard the original version, I just appreciated it in a brand new way. The fullness of this version almost is suffocating. The song doesn't feel like it has a chance to breathe. But this one, with a little thinner sound, with the guitars a little crunchier, it just adds to the heaviness of the track. It adds to the menacing vibe that I think they were going for. So I think it definitely loses a bunch on the '85 remaster. Destroyer, I definitely prefer the original version of it. So Destroyer is going to go to the original. Next up, we have the title track, Under the Blade. This was another very tough one for me to decide. I had to listen to both of these versions back to back a number of times to pick out which one I like better, and I just had a hard time choosing one because I think both versions have their pros and cons. The original, I think that intro, that palm muted intro, just like in What You Don't Know Sure Can Hurt You, sounds better on the original. And it's a little eerier, it's a little creepier. The beginning of that song has always sounded to me like you're laying on a table or a gurney going in for surgery. But the original one makes me feel like I'm at the mercy of like some madman or some mad scientist or like an alien or something. It just adds that fear factor. Whereas the remaster version, I kind of feel like I'm in a hospital with professionals. Still scary, but not as scary as the original. So the intro to the song definitely goes to the original. But I think when the song kicks in, I kind of like the mix of the remastered version a little bit better. What it comes down to, though, is my favorite part of the song, which is when the song returns to that that palm muted part after the guitar solo, and that lead into Dee Snider's big scream, which is probably my favorite part of the whole song. I think I prefer that slightly on the remastered. So that's the tiebreaker for me. Under the Blade's going to go to the '85 remastered, but both versions are so good. And so far, I think as you can tell, when I prefer the remastered version, it's like really close. But a lot of times when I prefer the original version, it's by far. So Sin After Sin I gave to the original, that was close, but both Run for Your Life and Destroyer were definite wins for the original. So that's something to consider as well. Next up, we have another one of my favorite songs on the album, Tear It Loose. I love this song. And I'm gonna kind of go a little, I'm gonna go a little off the charts here. That's a bit of a shout out to Dan from Off the Charts. Go check out his channel. He tells a lot of fun stories when he talks about these albums. And when I was listening to this song, I thought of a story with Tear It Loose that I'm gonna go into here. So when I was in ninth grade, I took a guitar class, and I had it for ninth and 10th grade. And in ninth grade, it was really cool. It was really laid back. It was basically just pick up an acoustic guitar, go play, and it was really lax, and it was fun. In 10th grade, during the course of the year that year, they sort of revamped it, and it was no longer just picking out an acoustic guitar and going off and doing your thing and practicing and whatever. It was like you had to start taking like courses on a computer, and as opposed to the teacher coming around and sitting down with you every so often to kind of gauge your progress, now you were kind of following like a more of a thing, I guess. I don't know. So in 10th grade, once we had moved to the computer system, and we had these like really weird guitar. I don't it was like a combination of an acoustic and an electric. It plugged into the computer. It was like really weird looking. I don't know. But it was my turn to play a song for him. And throughout all of ninth grade and into 10th grade up to this point, for whatever reason, I swear the teacher would never give me 100 on anything. And I always got a very good grade. I always got like a 95. He always gave me like a 90 or a 95. So I was like always right there, but I could just never get that 100. And I decided to play Tear It Loose. At least I don't think he knew, I had my earbuds in underneath the big headphones that were plugged into the computer, and I'm at the far end of the class from him. The teacher's up here at his desk. I'm all the way in the back row and on the other side, so I'm the farthest student away from him. And I've got, these big black headphones on that are attached to the computer, and underneath them I have my earbuds attached to my CD player. And when I get ready to play the song, I just casually hit play on my CD player right before I pick up my pick, and I'm playing. And of course, I'm behind a computer screen, so I don't know how he could have known I was listening to the CD. But I start playing it, and I'm playing just perfectly in time with JJ and Eddie, and I get through the song, and I thought I nailed it. And he's like, "That was good, but as I recall, I think that song was actually a lot faster. So I'm gonna have to give you probably about a 95." I'm like, I was playing it perfectly in time with the CD. It's faster because AJ Pero is a freaking beast. It's the drums that really drive that song. And even though you think of it as a fast song, the guitar playing is actually not that fast, except for maybe the rhythm part behind the guitar solo. But I don't know. I was thinking of that when I was listening to this song. So back to the subject at hand here. I think both versions are amazing. This is another one that had a hard time picking between the two, and I don't really have any big pros or cons one way or the other. I think it's a solid version, both versions, but I think I prefer the original just a little bit. I like the raw edge to it, but both versions kick a lot of ass. That brings us to the last song, Day of the Rocker. Again, this has never been one of my favorite songs on the album. I don't dislike it by any means, but it's always been sort of bottom of the barrel for me with Run for Your Life and Destroyer, and Day of the Rocker have always been kind of my lesser favorites on here. This one's a slower, kind of bluesier thing. It's decent. It's grown on me a little bit over the years. And again, I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other as to which version I think is better or worse. But I do think the rawer version of the original I prefer just slightly to the fuller version of the 85 remaster. So Day of the Rocker is going to go to the original. And with that, we have the original winning 5 tracks: Run for Your Life, Sin After Sin, Destroyer, Tear It Loose, and Day of the Rocker. With the 85 remaster winning with 4 tracks: What You Don't Know Sure Can Hurt You, Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, Shoot 'Em Down, and Under the Blade. So the original is going to be the winner, even though both versions, I think, are really good in their own right. And another thing the original has that the remaster doesn't has is that you don't have to listen to "I'll Never Grow Up Now," which would be my least favorite song on the album, if it's thrown in the mix there. I never thought that song fit on Under the Blade. It was a single in '79, but gosh, it feels more like a come out and play song to me than it does Under the Blade. So I kind of wish they wouldn't have thrown it on there. I think it's a stronger album and a more cohesive album without it. So I'll Never Grow Up Now, I don't think it needs to be there. So that's another plus, I guess, for the original version. So there you have it. Let me know which of these 2 versions of this album that you prefer in the comments below. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more videos like this in the future, and I'll catch you next time.